So it's specifically compassion for the other person's reality. And if I can get myself to a place where in every interaction, I'm like, well, I don't have a lock on reality. And my job is to try to understand this person's reality. If I just unpack, your mind, if I just try to understand, like, what are you thinking? How are you approaching it? What do you believe? What is getting in the way? Then whatever change is needed or influence is needed is going to be actually relatively transparent a lot of the time for both of us.
Can you explain what NLP is and at the same time what it isn't?
All right. What it is and what it isn't. Well, what it is a little easier for me. So it's a collection of tools that are very good at helping you help somebody else or yourself to change, to make whatever changes you're working on quickly and in a lasting way. It's not like a one size fits all. It's really a process of identifying somebody's mental model, what gets in the way of change and what would enable change. Could be a belief, limiting belief, could be a capability, could be a skill, could be how they think of themselves. There's just so many different pieces, but it's a process for dialing down very quickly into what will be that difference that makes the difference. What NLP is not, it's not mind control. You can't control somebody else's mind. You can't make somebody do something or think something. You can open the door to get them to want to be influenced. And NLP is very helpful in guiding you to a place where you can earn trust quickly. But people can tell when you're manipulating them. So it's not, there's no tricks here. This is stuff that's built on 50 years of time-tested practices from psychotherapy. I mean, people who with the best of intentions are trying to help others make changes that are meaningful. And it's been presented in a way that makes it very easy to kind of take it and apply it in multiple contexts.
And can you provide a little bit of like the history and what the science says about NLP? And we'll start with, what does it stand for?
Okay. Greg, should I just continue?
Yeah, get in there, Josh. I'll jump in when colors needed.
So it stands for NLP, the name neurolinguistic programming. And, that name, even for someone like me who's been around this stuff my whole life, it's a bit of a mouthful. I have to think about it. It's never been something that it's never been a useful name for me personally in terms of like saying, oh, this is what it's about and this is what it is. What I do think is helpful here is that it evokes the idea that we have certain patterns or programs, if you will. Everybody's comfortable with a computer metaphor now. We have kind of, you get me down a certain path, a program runs, I behave, I get triggered, I behave in a way I don't want to, for example. I have this old pattern of not putting myself out there in a certain way, or getting afraid when I'm going to, go speak publicly. Well, I can interrupt those programs or those patterns. And these are neural patterns. They're patterns in how my brain works. And they show up in my language, and they also can be influenced by my language. I think the founders of NLP were thinking of neurolinguistic as like, let's not even separate what's happening in the brain from language, because they're so intertwined. But I think that's the idea. Let's figure out, let's use language as a cue. And so it was a linguist and his partner, a professor of linguistics who founded NLP. They were studying the form, not the content, the language patterns of these great psychotherapists, and then trying to identify what are the key pieces that actually matter to focus on. What do they pick up on and what do they use in their own language?
So essentially leveraging language patterns to influence a certain behavior, whether that behavior is positive, hopefully, or negative, but using language as a tool to do so.
It's a little bit more than that as well. The metaphor I like to use, and Josh kind of touched on it. When we're born, we got this really powerful computer in our head, but nobody really tells us how to use it. Our parents tell us what not to do, how to behave. Then we go to school, they tell us what to learn, but nobody really tells you, how do I use my brain in an efficient way? Because, we go around these patterns, and these patterns are not based on reality. They're based on our map of reality. So just because we react a certain way to a certain event outside of us doesn't mean that the event means what we think it means. It's an event, right? It just happened, and we assign meaning to the event. And what NLP does, it says, look, it's your experience. You get to decide what meaning you assign. And it teaches us to interrupt a negative association and to attach a positive one. And once you do that, things change. It's, like Buddha said, you can't change life. Life comes with pain, but how we react to pain, it's our choice whether we suffer or we just vibe with what's happening in our world. And when NLP does, it allows us to vibe with the world, with the events that happen to us, with ourselves and with others around us.
So give me a real world example of something that people commonly deal with on an everyday basis and how we can leverage NLP.
So there is a presupposition. Basically, in NLP, we have this thing called presuppositions, which are resident programs. It's like if you want to use a computer and you want to prepare a document, you need a program. You can't just go into your home screen and start typing. You got to start Word or Pages or something else. You need a program running in the background. And that's what NLP is. One of the programs is everyone does what they do for a positive intention. So if somebody's being a jerk, they're rarely being a jerk because they're a jerk. They're getting something positive out of their behavior. And if we can figure out what the positive behavior is, we can speak to them on their terms. And a real life example, a few weeks ago, I don't know if this ever happened to you guys, but my wife was unhappy with me. And over something that I thought was kind of...
Never happened. I don't know.
But I'm intrigued by this strange thing.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, this is so innocuous, what she's upset with me with. It can't be that. There's got to be more to it than that. What is her positive intention? And when I got to it, when I realized why she was doing what she was doing, I'm like, it makes perfect sense. It's not about this. It's about that. So if I deal with that, this will go away. And that's in every encounter. If you can say this person is not being the way they're being because it's about me, it's something about them, they're getting something out of this negative behavior. If you can identify it, I believe that you can talk to them in their world and you become more effective.
And so walk me through that process in detail. So I'll use an example. Let's say you're online for coffee and the person in front of you is just kind of a jerk. They keep on, they harass the barista, they change the order, they're just they just woke up real grumpy this morning. They are upset at you because maybe your kid did something. How would you approach this person? You're in line, whether it's a coffee or the grocery line. I'm sure we've all had that situation where someone's just a complete jerk. How would you approach this person or try to avoid escalation, de-escalate someone who looks like they're just really going to explode?
Well, I mean, I have been there, and there's a couple things to keep in mind. So you mentioned at the end, how would you approach this person and avoid de-escalation? And it's also possible that you choose to say, this person is their own person. I'm going to let them be, and it doesn't have to affect me in the same way. And so you can have different outcomes that you want in mind. But in either case, when I've been able to go to a place of say, okay, wait a second, this person's operating the best they know how, given their mental model right now, right? And so some things I can call to mind. I can't check it out with this person, but I can imagine it, and there's decent odds that I'm on the right track. But regardless, it'll help me be more compassionate. So if I, for example, say like, okay, this person is probably wanting to feel like they have some control over their life today, or they're probably wanting to get a greater sense that like somebody cares, or they want to assert that they have some authority over their life, right? Like that's probably driving this person, right? They're searching for that kind of control, authority, fair sense of fairness, right? They're going about it in a terrible way. They're probably going to get exactly the opposite when people push back and give them scowling looks and get annoyed. They're probably going to carry with them negativity for the next 2 hours. But their intention is probably something like that, even if they're not in touch with it consciously. There's something that they are getting out of it. How does it serve them to behave that way? There's something important to them about wanting to kind of prove to themselves that they don't have to just give in to life. It could be any one of those things. As long as I can get in touch with that in my mind, I can think, look, wow, this person is struggling in this moment. I've been there. I understand that. That's a perfectly reasonable, positive thing to want to have some control over life or to prove that you can't be pushed around by life. Like maybe I can't do something for them, but maybe just thinking that allows me to approach them in an open body posture in a way where I'm like, with, you know, the kind of energy that might be useful. And maybe I say something like, you know, it's like, hey, I've been there, but maybe I just say it to myself. Maybe I'm just like, you know what? I've been there. Let them just move on. Maybe I say something to the barista afterwards to help their day. It's like, but as long as I get to that positive intention, it just opens a world of opportunities for me to no longer get triggered and to not have to just step into that cycle.
It does, and I'm curious to take it one step further. How do you think about when that fear is coming directed at you?
So, yeah, sorry, I see you going for it, Greg.
No, I want to make sure I understand your question. Your question is, how do you control yourself when it happens, or how?
I think for this one, if someone is very upset and angry and it's directed toward you and you're trying to de-escalate, like, let's take this down a notch, and this person is clearly very upset, very angry, very emotional, potentially acting irrationally. How do you and your how would you advise someone to de-escalate a situation?
If you're not in a position to simply walk away, right, to remove yourself from the situation and you have to somehow kind of engage, then or maybe you choose to engage, right? But for whatever reason you always have the option. You usually have the option to walk away. But let's say you're engaging, it's directed at you, or you feel the urge to engage. So a few things you can do. One is, if you know about this idea of searching for the positive intention, you might be able to remind yourself, hey, I wanted to do this next time I got triggered. Let me just take a breath and see if I can identify it. For some people, that will work. For a lot of people, they're triggered in that moment. It's too hard to think of that. Something that is quite counterintuitive that comes from NLP, that this is something that great change makers will just so regularly do. They meet the person where they are before trying to get them to change. So if somebody's really agitated and it's directed at you, and you just completely go the opposite, and you're just like, hey, what's wrong with you? Or just like, calm down, right? Hey, man. If you go to the opposite, it invalidates their reality. It's almost like you're saying you're insane, right? And then the person has this urge to prove that they're right. But if you can meet them where they are and just acknowledge some aspect of the reality, like they're really angry at you, if you can even just like join them in their breathing and some of their nonverbals, it unconsciously communicates your reality, like I respect it at least. Like I at least see that this is where you are, right? And you earn the right to influence. So if you're really agitated with me, I'm just like, this is really not cool. I do not like what's happening here. Like if I'm kind of joining you with your energy, right? I don't have to lose my cool, but then I'm forging a bit of a connection. And if you're a rational person, I mean, look, if somebody is like, you know, on drugs or something, sure, that's a whole different topic. But like, if you're a rational person who's just getting triggered, right? Like you're going to be able to meet them, and then you can kind of start to calm them down. Taking that initial step of meeting them where they are in terms of getting in sync in some way, non-verbally is great, with your breathing is great, but it could also be in terms of something they said. If you can find something that you can agree with, like, hey, time, like it is tough right now. Or like maybe they're complaining about the cost of the coffee. It's just like the cost is outrageous, right? You can join them there and then kind of move them along. So that can be powerful.
We'll segue away from this, but the place I see this a lot as a parent, unfortunately, is youth sports, where I see parents go bananas and people try to take down the temperature. So I'll segue to something you wrote in the book I found was very interesting. You write, the people don't react to reality. They react to their experience of reality. So how can this understanding transform the way we show up in relationships, especially when there's, conflict, maybe not to the degree we discussed?
Reality is very subjective. There is a man I respect a lot. His name is Dr. Covey. I'm sure we've all heard of him, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talks about a story about a man going to a very important job interview. And he's on a subway, and another man comes in with around 6 kids. And these kids are just being crazy. They're running up and down the car, and this man is getting ready for his meeting, and he's being really triggered by this man who's not taking care of his kids. And this happens for about 5 or 10 minutes. And the only reality is he's going to an interview, and there are kids running around the car. Everything else is interpretation. And all of a sudden, the man who's skinned to this turns around and says, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Their mother just died in the hospital. I don't know how to break it to him." So, and all of a sudden, his reality shifts, a different frame. All of a sudden, the reality is not this guy's an asshole with a bunch of little kids who he can't control. The reality is, oh my God, what a poor man. What can I do to make his experience better? So the reality never changed, but the filter did. And I guess that's what NLP does. You can always find an empowering filter to any situation.
So, it's interesting because it also makes me think of, this idea of having compassion wherever you are, and trying to, say to yourself, that person's maybe having a rough day, or I don't know what they're going through. Sometimes very difficult when you're in the thick of it, but always helpful to have that frame.
I think in the essence of so many of the teachings of NLP is compassion. It's compassion that for specifically the other person's mental model, because nobody can actually understand reality fully. Like there's just too much information out there. I mean, you mentioned even the example of parents at at the soccer game. Some of them are thinking of it in terms of like, this is about, whether my kids are being respectful. And other parents are like, this is about whether my kids are having fun, or whether they know how to share, or whether they're trying their hardest. It's just like, these things are not part of, it's not like there's just one reality out there. We have our interpretations of it. We project our thoughts onto it. So no matter what situation we're in, even this conversation right now, we all have different beliefs to some degree about what's going on. And we're imagining, for example, different reactions from the audience. We're imagining different people listening, or imagining whether these, examples we have are relevant to their lives. There have to be some deletions, distortions, and generalizations in our minds from actual reality. We just can't have all of it. And it's necessarily going to be different. And so it's specifically compassion for the other person's reality. And if I can kind of get myself to a place where in every interaction, I'm like, well, I don't have a lock on reality, and my job is to try to understand this person's reality. Then, it kind of, I'm not going to, even if I just unpack, your mind, if I just try to understand, like, what are you thinking? How are you approaching it? What do you believe? What is getting in the way? Then whatever change is needed or influence is needed is going to be actually relatively transparent a lot of the time for both of us.
Feels like the world would be a better place if we all enacted this in our everyday lives.
We think so. I mean, we think people need to know about this stuff. Like, we really do. This is amazing stuff. And we didn't invent it. We just worked hard to try to teach it in a simple way.
So if we segue away from, the greater good, we'll get back to ourselves, fulfilling our own personal goals. Something you also write, about well-formed outcomes as essential for achieving goals, and goal setting can often end up with a vague intention. And so can you talk a bit about how we should approach this using NLP?
Yeah, the well-formed outcome, there are 5 criteria. And if you look at any goal that you have, if it doesn't meet these criteria, you're probably not going to make progress. And if it does meet these criteria, you probably are. So, it's a place that I almost always start. And I know many people who practice NLP almost always start as, do you have a well-formed outcome? And in the book, we talk about is, do you know where you're going? Because how can you possibly get there if you don't? But I know that one of the criteria that I really love, is just because I come up against this so often, is with any goal, the first question that I ask usually is that in your control? Greg comes to me, he says, hey, let's set a goal, bestseller by X date. And I'm like, I love the idea, Greg, but like, it's not in our control. It requires other people who we can't influence. Right? A particular number of sales by the way, 2 days ago, we actually learned that we were a bestseller. So we got a USA Today bestseller status.
Congratulations.
But that's not a well-formed outcome. It is not in our control. So what makes sense is to step back and say, what is in our control that's likely to move us in that direction, that we are really going to hold ourselves accountable to. And it was things like making sure that we work hard on marketing and publicity, and we try to make the messages clear, and we try to think about all our channels. Like all that stuff is in our control. And so we did, and we didn't beat ourselves up about whether it was ever going to be a bestseller. That's just one of the criteria. But there's
You walk us through the 5 briefly. That would be great.
walk through the 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Should I just take them all, Greg, or do you want to
You got this, and I'll jump in later with my little metaphor.
example? Okay, great. So is it in your control? Great place to start with that one. By the way, something that's always in your control is a learning goal. And research has shown that if you set a learning goal, you're actually more likely to achieve the outcome than if you just set an outcome goal. So a learning goal is like, well, how am I trying to develop myself in this process? I want to influence Greg. Well, let me try to figure out how can I learn how to influence Greg, right? That's going to put me in a better position. And that is in my control to try to learn that. So is it in my control? One of them is kind of straightforward, which is it measurable? Or would you be able to actually know that you got there? But sometimes we have goals about like, I want to be, in better shape. Well, what does that mean? In better shape, right? And so you're just setting yourself up for failure because you can't really ever know. Then you've got, is it stated in the positive? And that is, do I know what I'm going towards, not just what I'm running away from? It's like, I don't want to be anxious all the time. I don't want to get triggered all the time. Great. That's a powerful motivator, but it just gets you to run. But then in what direction, right? And so when we get clear on where we're going to, well, instead of getting triggered, I want to be able to kind of step back and like see the big picture before I react. Okay, now we know where we're headed towards. Then we've got, do you know what context you want it in? Some goals, we say like, I want to like cut out desserts. Okay, do you want that in all, like you're never going to celebrate at a birthday party or anything like that? Let's be specific about the context. Or I want to be assertive. Okay, do you want to be assertive with everyone, even when your kids are looking for some like cuddling or something? Like so it's like when we're not thinking about the context, we sometimes sabotage ourselves because it's not okay to just make this change in our lives because we would lose out on other things. And then the last one, this is probably the most important. This is about whether you're going to be fighting with yourself as you try to make progress. Is it ecological? Now that term will make sense after I just say a little bit more. Probably most people know about ecosystems from school, right? You have this balanced ecosystem that, the frogs and the flies and the fish and whatever, right? And if anything gets out of balance, the other parts of the system push back and it creates this imbalance. Well, we have ecosystems in our mind. Gregory Bateson, a famous anthropologist, 60 years ago, he wrote about the ecology of mind, that if we make a change to one thing, will other things push back? So it's like, okay, I want to be more assertive. Well, guess what? If my identity is that I'm a helper, well, being assertive might just confront my identity. I'm not making that change. I'd have to change who I am. Now, if I can find a way to change so that I can feel like being assertive helps me become a helper, more of a helper, yeah, then I make that change. But until I've found a way that the change is not going to cause pushback from other parts of me, I'm just not making the change. And that's often what people fight up against. It's like, I want to get in shape, sure. And then you just keep not doing it your whole life. But then you can make a switch one day when you identify that.
So it sounds like self-awareness and pragmatism is key here with regards to goal setting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is. And I think you can get very concrete about what to be aware of and how to go about discovering what those things are that may need to be surfaced.
Jason Walkup here, founder and co-CEO of mindbodygreen and the host of the mindbodygreen podcast. Please subscribe. You'll never miss a show and you won't regret it. Something else I thought was very interesting I want to double click on is the language you use. Are you moving towards something or are you running away from something? And I see that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a specific example in mind right now?
Yeah, 100%. So we moved to Miami 3 years ago. We've always loved Miami. Our oldest daughter was entering kindergarten. We used to come here. It was time to kind of leave New York City. And we chose Miami. We got engaged in Miami. We fell in love in Miami. We go to Miami every winter. So my wife and I have a long, rich history. We love the culture, the weather, everything. And we made a conscious choice to move here. And so there's been a huge migration to Miami. There are also a lot of people who moved to Miami who bought houses sight unseen, who were fleeing the Northeast or California for reasons we all know. They just had to get out. Never been to Miami. And I think, and Miami is just one example. A lot of people relocated because they were running away from something, not moving towards something. And what I've seen in Miami recently is some of those people are leaving. They're not happy. And I come back to this where were you moving towards something, or were you running away from something?
And we do that with everything now, I think. We either go towards pleasure or away from pain. These are the only two motivators that motivate us to do anything. If you think about anything that we do, I mean anything, when we exercise, when we overeat, when we do something good, we do something bad, we do it either to have pleasure or to get out of pain, sometimes both. Drugs, right? It gives you pleasure and takes you away from your reality, takes you out of pain. It's not a positive, but you understand why people do that. Same thing with exercise. You start exercising to get out of pain, but eventually turn into pleasure. And I think once you can take an experience that's good for you but painful and make it pleasurable, once you make the frame shift when you're moving away from pain becomes moving towards pleasure, that's when you become truly successful in whatever area that you plan for yourself. It's really, I'm glad you brought up goals, because goals are rule one in anything. The metaphor that I like to use is, you go to a river with a strong current and there's a rowboat there. You get in the rowboat, you're going to get somewhere. It may not be where you want to go, but if you don't know where you want to go and you get an oar and you start taking yourself there, you're going to get to the exact destination. Same thing with anything in life. Whatever you do, you're getting somewhere, right? You may not like where you're getting, but you're going to get there. So the whole point of goals is you're sort of like, it's GPS for your life in every area. Most successful people have a goal for everything, for their family, for their business, for their emotional, spiritual development, for their body. And what NLP does, it makes us better at achieving those goals. At least that's what I believe.
So let's talk about goals in the context of health and wellness, and and more specifically, the language we use. So the example that comes to mind, I love a good dessert. Rather than saying, this is my cheat day, flipping it to, this is my treat, abundance versus scarcity.
Yeah. Well, and so first of all, that I think that one works for me. That's a great one for like, because abundance versus scarcity does make a big difference. It taps into this, what we want versus what we don't want. But here's an idea also, and once I say it, and my guess is that you'll say, okay, yeah, I agree with that, but I'm curious. In NLP, we kind of take the attitude of what's useful, what's adaptive for you. And so for somebody, if feeling the freedom, having a cheat day might be a way to give themselves freedom. It's like, this is no longer a hard task because I know I always have the freedom to have a cheat day if I need to. And therefore, I'm not at fault or haven't messed up if I just have a day off, right? And so for that person, they're more likely to follow through if they have it, because for them, cheat day means something different. What's the meaning of it, essentially. But for other people, cheat day is going to have that meaning that you're talking about, where it's like, I'm labeling myself in this negative way. I'm beating myself up. It's like, this is how I punish myself for doing it so that I'm less likely to do it. If that's what you're doing, I think it probably is going to get in the way and not be adaptive. Calling it a treat day would. But it's really about, what's the meaning behind it? And this piece about if I'm beating myself up for it, that's something we do look for commonly in language patterns in NLP. It's this, we call it modal operators of necessity or of possibility. Nobody's ever going to hear that term and say, oh, that's a useful term. Let me hear that, right? But this is some of the complex stuff from NLP that we try to make very simple. And a simple way to do it is if you hear yourself saying, or somebody else saying, oh, I should do this, or I have to do this, or I need to do this, right? Or I suck because I'm not doing this, right? Which is essentially what the cheat day means for a lot of people. That's an indicator about your relationship with the task. And so in NLP, we learn to notice these ways we talk to ourselves and then get curious about the relationship we have with the task. And how can I shift that relationship? And maybe it's like, okay, this is the day that I get to do this, which is a treat day, right? But a great question that you can ask whenever you find yourself saying something like that is, okay, what would happen if I did it? Or what would happen if I didn't do it? What that does is it moves you past this moment of kind of getting stuck on the thing and move to the next step and discover that life goes on and that it's, the big scary monster is not actually so big and scary. But that's so I kind of want to dial down on the meaning of it there also.
Can we talk about language with regards to goal setting, more about what we want to achieve versus less of what we're trying to avoid? So in the context of, we all know the cliche, someone in midlife, they have a, health wake-up call, or they're concerned about something in their family that's possibly going to pass down to them genetically, and they're worried about poor health outcome. In my view, there's a big difference, and this is from my personal experience, when I start to think about more about the positive outcome and what I'm looking to achieve. For example, focusing more on, I want to live a longer, healthier life, defined as being active and around for my young children, versus I want to avoid something over here, heart disease, for example, or immobility because someone experienced it. So I'm focusing more on the outcome than the negative health event that I'm trying to avoid from a mental model perspective.
I think it actually depends on you, because some people are pain motivated, other people are pleasure motivated. For example, myself, when I was 40 years old, I was diagnosed with high blood pressure, and I was a heavy smoker at the time. And I tried quitting smoking. I tried everything for years. I tried every possible hypnosis. I just couldn't quit smoking. But when I got the health scare, I was like, uh-oh, I don't want to die. And I quit like this in an instant. So I was more motivated by the pain than, if that makes sense. So I think it really depends on the person. If you're somebody who is motivated by your goal, saying, I want to be healthy, and then that's your goal. But there's other people who are motivated by, I don't want to be like my dad. My mother died from cancer. I don't want that. I want to make sure this never happens to me. So I really believe that it's not a one-fit-all solution. It really depends on the audience. And that takes us to one of the core beliefs of NLP. The meaning of a message is not the intent of the speaker, but impact on the listener, right? So if I'm speaking to you and I'm trying to convince you of something, and my message doesn't land, it's my fault. That means I don't understand you enough. If I'm trying to get you to lose weight, to quit smoking, to be healthier, if I'm giving you pictures of how great things are going to feel and it's not landing with you, then I should probably try something else. I should probably say, look, do you really want to die in a hospice somewhere with a tube up your nose? And maybe that'll resonate with you. So when you talk about goals, I really believe that to get to your goal, the end result has to motivate you as the person setting that goal.
Very fair point. And I'll go to persuasion, because my first understanding of NLP was in the context of persuasion. I read Structure of Magic. Then years later, Neil Strauss wrote The Pickup Artist, was about, using NLP in maybe not the most ethical way to essentially pick up women. And Neil Strauss built a whole brand around it, kind of put NLP on the map in like a popular culture sense. So with that said, how do we use NLP in everyday persuasion, negotiation? Those are real skills. How do we size someone up quickly and persuade them?
One thing I want to comment on there is I think that while Neil Strauss may have brought attention to NLP for certain people, I think we can never know exactly what had the effects, but I think it had the effect of people thinking that it is about these transactional approaches to just trying to manipulate somebody one time, get what you want, and then leave them worse off. And I think that contributed to there being less interest in NLP ultimately. And now that that's kind of faded into the background, there's an opportunity to introduce people back to NLP in what it really can be and should be in a more ethical way, which is it's not about manipulating someone one time. And this is not just something about NLP. Any tools for persuasion and influence, if they are actually useful, if somebody wants to try and doesn't care about burning bridges and just wants to try to manipulate people one time, they can. But the other person will know it and will resent it, and it's going to burn bridges. But people are not dumb. But if you're using it ethically, then you can really make breakthroughs and help people change, help people get in shape, help people.
We'll assume the intentions for our listeners. We'll assume the intentions are good. We've got a good group of listeners.
And the examples we've tried to use in the books are positive, and we've talked about using things ethically because it is powerful stuff. And so day-to-day influence, there's a few things. One is in every interaction, it's important to honor the process of starting by building rapport. So, and this is all about getting in sync one way or another, finding how you can be in sync with the other person, even if it's just non-verbally, even if it's just matching their breathing. That this enables you to have some level of kind of interpersonal connection where you're like, okay, this is a person that I can trust to some degree. I'm open to listening. You meet them where they are. That theme that came earlier, right? In the coffee shop example, you meet them where they are before trying to take them anywhere else. You get very curious about what their mental model is, and you stay open to the fact that you don't know exactly what's needed and you might be wrong. And but you have a direction in mind. Like, I think that I want to, for example, on this podcast, I want to influence a lot of people to think, hey, there's something really intriguing and powerful in NLP that I might want to use, right? So I have that in mind. But as I'm speaking, with you and with Greg, and also I'm imagining the audience, I'm thinking about what are ways that I can be kind of curious about, like, well, what are the things that might be coming up for them that might get in the way? How do they think of themselves? What do they believe? What's important to them? What are their skills? What are the ways that they get in their own way? What are their behaviors day to day? What environment do they live in? And as I get curious about that, it's like, to do NLP well is to just practice this art of being super curious about someone's mental model. If I do that well, then I can find ways to bring you along to something that I think is useful for you. But you're ultimately going to evaluate it. What I can do is help you to be open to thinking about it. And NLP, so if you just have that attitude, I think you can succeed, you can go far. But also in NLP, there's a lot of very concrete tools for specific beliefs that'll help you do that. Specific language patterns you can look for and ask questions about to help you understand how someone thinks. Specific tools, or Greg mentioned an image you might have in your mind. I don't know if right now, as you think about a goal, I would invite anyone listening right now to think of some goal that you have where you feel like it's kind of overwhelming and it's just like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Maybe it has to do with, like, how do I possibly manage to get my kids out the door in the morning? Or maybe it's something with work, or maybe it's something with exercise, or maybe it's this, you know, changing your dessert habits, right? For most people, there's going to be some mental image in mind. They're going to have some picture in their mind, maybe of themselves, maybe of the thing. For some people, it might be up here. It might be large. It might be in black and white. Those mental images are actually an important part of how we mentally represent a situation. And you can just explore what happens when you take that mental image and you move it far away and make it small.
I want to talk about goals. I think that's very interesting. But can we spend a moment on how do we identify a language pattern when we're conversing with someone for the first time?
Yes. So in chapters 12 through 16, we've tried to simplify it as much as we were able to so far, down to 5 questions that you can be thinking about. One is, what specifically? You said something earlier and Greg said, well, hold on, I just want to check. What specifically are you referring to? I don't know if you remember that moment. Or how specifically? Like, maybe it's like, hey, we need to convince people. Okay. How specifically are we convincing them? What specifically are we convincing them of? How are we failing to convince them? Or we need a decision. Well, a decision's not a thing. Let's turn it back into a verb. How specifically are you deciding? Or how specifically are you failing to decide? So what specifically? How specifically? Who specifically? It's like, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. Really? According to whom? All right, fine. I'm really worried about what so-and-so, this one person, thinks. Suddenly it becomes a tractable problem, right? So what specifically, how specifically, who specifically? And then we can get into what would happen if you did, or what would happen if you didn't? That question that helps you move on when you're kind of like stuck. You're feeling like, I have to do this. I should do this. And what was the 5th question, Greg?
I think it was the universal quantifiers. You always never, I get this all the time. You never do this. And I say, really? Never? Have I ever done it before? Well, you did do it once, so So I only do it sometimes. And you know, it really is useful. It's useful because I believe you have to earn the right to influence both yourself and others. And I say yourself because the person who we lie to the most is ourselves. We make these promises we tend not to keep. And every time we break a promise to ourselves, we lose credibility with ourselves. So I think we need to earn credibility with ourselves and with others. And the way you build credibility with others, I'll start with that is, as Josh said earlier, you identify their model of the world and you talk to them as if you live there. For example, if I have an employee who's motivated by achievement, I can talk to her about money all day long, but it's not going to influence her. I have to talk to her where she lives. If my daughter is influenced by things, then the way I motivate her is with things. I listen to the way people speak. We listen to the way people speak. If you were to tell me, I hear you, I hear what you're saying, for me to tell you to use visual language because you're an auditory person, I'm not honoring your experience. So I have to tell you, if you're an auditory person, I tell you. If you're a visual person, I show you. If you're a kinesthetic person, I don't necessarily touch you, but I make it more of a feeling experience.
Great example. Just pause there for a second to walk people through. Just the simple language of I see you versus I hear you versus I feel you. That tells you a lot.
Everyone listening can just notice which one of those three resonated the most. It's not the same for everybody.
Sorry to interrupt. Please continue, but I just wanted to call that out.
No, and there are so many tools in NLP that bring the unconscious forward. Things you don't think about, you start thinking about them. For example, another core belief of NLP is the person who's most flexible will get the best results. And that doesn't mean you're weak, you fold every time there's pressure. You just have a lot more tools at your availability. You're able to deal with more. If you say to yourself, I can go into this meeting and I'm ready for whatever comes my way, you're much better off than saying, oh my God, what if this happens? What if that happens? It really all about belief and credibility.
So I agree. I think of mindset here. And I think a lot about AI, like I'm sure you do. Think about how it's going to impact our work, our children, education. And I think of skill sets that probably aren't going away. I think about grit, adversity, EQ, negotiation, persuasion. And this is one of the reasons why I want to have you guys in the show, because I think about NLP and everything we've talked about today. How do you think about NLP and the different use cases and almost this rebranding, if you will, from strictly persuasion and manipulation, perhaps the bad rep it developed a couple of decades ago, to where it sits today, and how it can be useful for children, for adults, and education more broadly?
So I have 3 little kids also, and you'll see in the beginning of the book, I said this, and honestly, when I thought it, I like I started crying. But I wrote to them, if you're ever in need of some wisdom, look in here. Like as they go through life, the social emotional needs, the ways to interact with other people, right? There's so much in here that's going to allow them to navigate that whole world no matter what's coming, right? And we know there's stuff coming that we can't even predict. And so this, I feel like, this is just this incredible gift that I'm in a position to give to them, that, and now hopefully can give to lots of people. Lots of people can give to their children, but I mean, that's like, that's what I see here. Like, this is like a guidebook for emotional intelligence. This is a guidebook for taking on growth mindset. This is a guidebook for being able to compassionately communicate and influence where you need to, but also be open to being influenced, right? This stuff is all in there. We've tried to make it simple to do. There's just reflection questions in each chapter. So if you're thinking about them, you're using it. We've also, you mentioned AI, and Greg did something brilliant here. Greg, like, constantly is pushing me to think in new ways. It's awesome. He's like this sort of stealth genius. He likes to say he dumbs things down, but he created this amazing talk to the book tool. So you can go to our website, nlpdifference.com, and you can just say like, hey, here's the situation I'm struggling with my kids. What questions should I ask myself? Or what should I do? Right. And it can tell you stuff from the book to do, stuff from NLP to do. Anyway, so yes, I mean, I'm with you completely. I think these are the kinds of tools we want to empower kids with for an unknown future.
And what NLP is not, and I want to be clear about this, it's not, when we wrote the book, we wanted to stay away from this, wooey law of attraction. If you go to sleep at night and you dream of a bicycle, there'll be one with a bow in your front yard. Everything in our book is backed by science. It's all peer reviewed. We took the stuff that is out there and we kept it out because we had too much respect for our readers. This is a real book. And one thing about NLP, I want to be clear, all it really is a study of excellence. It's a living document, because what it says is, if anyone in the world can do it, and they're doing it successfully, with a few exceptions, obviously at 56 years old, the chances of me playing professional sports, I can play in a maybe semi-pro league or something if I get really good, but I'm not going to be playing for Miami Heat, just not. But if we want to do a podcast, for example, we can say, okay, what does Jason do? We can interview Jason. We can get his beliefs. We can get what he does. And we're probably not going to be as successful as you are. But we can start a podcast following the clues you leave behind, because success does leave clues. And that's with anything. With NLP, it says you can model excellence. There are questions you can ask. You can figure out whoever is doing what they're doing that you want to do, figure out what they think, how they believe. I mean, you can drill down when you view success. Where do you see it? Is it in color? Is it moving? Is it in a frame? Is there sound? You can distill all these beliefs out, and there's a way to install them in yourself and be sort of propelled. You'll be propelled forward. And again, we're not suggesting this is magic. You do what you do, and you might, but what we do promise, you're going to be better than you were. Because if you're doing what you're doing and it's not working, I would imagine if you try something else, you might do a little better. And to answer your question, Jason, I think whether NLP and AI are going to work together, listen, I'm just a lawyer. I don't know. Maybe. We'll find out. But I think that NLP, the questions that are there, you can use it for anything. You want to understand AI? Find somebody who understands AI. Find out what they believe. Find out what they do. And if you believe the same thing they believe and do the same thing that they do, you'll certainly be much better at understanding and using AI as you were before. And that's the whole point of our book. Our book is simple, digestible steps that if you follow them, you can be better at anything, literally anything. Because one of the beliefs of NLP is you have what it takes in you to take the next step. You may not be able to start a podcast today, but I can go on Amazon and buy a book on how to start a podcast. And Jason, I'm not trying to compete with you. I'm not suggesting that we're going to start a podcast. I'm just giving an example that's applicable to this conversation. We have what we need to take the next step in anything. You want to lose weight? You can go walk around the block. You can buy a book. You want to become a better painter, lawyer, doctor, father, husband? You can go on the internet and do a Google search. How do I become a better whatever? That's the first step. Nobody can stop you. And after that, there's another step. There's always a step you can take to get closer to your goal.
Do you think most of our problems or our failure to achieve our goals lies in an action from there? What do you think goes wrong?
I think it's two things. I think a lot of the goals we think we want, we don't really want, because there's something there that's preventing us from getting it. I've recently lost about 25 pounds. I've been exercising my whole life. I've been working out. I've been doing cardio, but I couldn't lose weight. Why? Because I wasn't willing to give up the nights out with friends, the drinking, the eating. I had a conflict. I wanted to look a certain way, but I wasn't willing to do what I needed to do because it was too much fun doing the other thing. So I had to reconcile. And that's what I think happens. The reason people don't get their goals It's rarely that they're lazy. I just don't think they really want it. Because if you really wanted something, there's nothing stopping us. There are tools, there are steps we can do to get there.
In closing, covered a lot. I encourage everyone to buy the book. The book's fantastic. But in closing, if there's one thing that our listeners could do today to transform their lives, what would it be?
All right, here's one thing. I'm going to invite everyone listening to think of some situation where you're not taking action that you'd like to take. And it's like, well, because if I did that, it would cause, this other problem. Like, well, like if I give more control to people on my team, then, I can't make sure that we have the quality that we need. And I'm going to invite you to ask this question to yourself. How will doing that thing that you're fearing actually enable you to get closer to your goal? And you can just explore what happens when you ask that question. So how will giving away some of the control to people on my team enable me to actually have better quality? And for some people listening, there's an immediate insight. For other people, it may just have the effect of allowing them to pause and just like explore some new options that they hadn't explored before, or to come to peace with not doing it. Any of those reactions are good.
The one thing I would recommend is what we just talked about, Jason. If everyone could internalize the belief, all I need is within me now, it's incredibly empowering. Because that belief basically says that I can achieve anything. I just got to take the next step. And that's, I think, the biggest, and again, this is what I say is just my opinion, obviously. I don't have the background to talk about what everyone believes. But my belief is most people get in trouble because they're victims of their environment. They believe that it's the boss, the wife, the husband, the kids, the father, the mother, who were brought up the wrong way. It's, if you take responsibility, say, my life is mine. I'm responsible for my failures and my wins. And whatever happens, I deserve. And I have it in me to go wherever I want to go. That even when you don't get there, you internalize another belief of NLP, which is there's no failure, there's only feedback. So if I do something and I don't get the result that I want, I don't look at it as that I fail. I'm like, oh, it doesn't work. Let's try something else. And that doesn't work. Let's try something else. And you keep trying it. I think Winston Churchill said, Americans always get it right after they try everything else, which is kind of funny, but it's true, right? You always get there after you try everything else that hasn't worked.
Look, I agree. I think so much starts with ownership, having a sense of personal responsibility, accountability, no matter what it is. It takes two to tango.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, Greg, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.